Welcome to the Financial Separation webinar today. I'm Catherine Scard. I'm a financial advisor and I work for Lester Brunt Wealth Management. I'll explain a little bit more about Lester Brunt and St James's Place and how we can fit into your financial planning in a moment. As I mentioned, Lauren is joining us today. Lauren is my right-hand woman. She's the lady that organises my life and she's absolutely fantastic. If you guys have got any generic questions through the session, then please take yourself off mute and you can ask me. Of course, with the topic that we're discussing today, it can be an extremely emotional topic of conversation. So if you have a particular question that you obviously don't want to share, I just encourage you probably to pop it in the chat. Send it to Lauren through a direct message, and obviously afterwards I can come back to you. Lauren will also put in the chat box her email address and my email address. So if you have any questions offline, then we will absolutely give you a call to discuss it further. I hope that's okay with everybody. So, financial separation, managing your money during divorce. Again, the topics that we'll discuss today are wide-reaching and wide-ranging. I'm not sure as to what situation you are currently in or the stage you're in. Forgive me if I teach you to suck eggs on various bits of the webinar, but again, there might be things that you can pull out of it that will be of interest to you. So if I can get the slideshow to work, let's look at the agenda. So the first bit explains St James's Place and Lester Brunt Wealth Management and how we as companies can fit into your lifestyle and help you plan your financial future. Then we'll move on to look at what happens to assets during divorce. And there are lots of different options in that. So we'll look at certain ones individually. Again, I don't know where you are with your journey at the moment, but there is something called a Form E that's sent by solicitors. So we'll spend a little bit of time looking at that. That would lead us nicely into dividing your assets. And then at the end, if you have any questions. Like I said, though, if you do have a generic question about one of the slides, please let us know during the presentation. If not, send your details to Lauren and we'll pick it up after. So, St James's Place, who are they? They're a FTSE 100 company that look after investments and pensions on behalf of their clients. They're a leading UK financial advice business. I've worked for them for 5 years and I'm very proud to say I'm part of the St James's Place family. We work in partnership to plan, grow and protect our clients' financial future. We've got over 2,500 advisory practices nationwide supported by over 5,000 employees. Where do Lester Brunt then fit into that? So I often say to clients, because they go, we've got St James's Place, you, Lester Brunt, what does that mean? So with St James's Place, like I said, they provide investments and pensions to their clients. You can't just walk into a St James's Place bank on the high street. They don't exist. So there are practices all around the country, of which Lester Brunt is one. They're a managing partner practice of St James's Place. I've worked for Lester Brunt for 5 years now, and they are based in Wimborne. I live on Portland in Dorset, but with the technology advancements that we've had, particularly since COVID, which I'm sure all of you found that we couldn't Zoom, we didn't know what Zoom was before COVID, we can reach clients all around the country now. So Lester Brunt is celebrating 10 years of excellent service. And as I mentioned, they're a managing partner practice. We are very hands-on with our clients. We treat you as family. We are a family-run business. It was founded in 2013 by Michael Lester and Martin Brunt. Michael Lester has 3 of his daughters working in the practice, and Martin Brunt has his son, who is an advisor within the practice. We're very keen to look after you and to look after charities, and we've raised over £230 for charity. And you can see there's a picture of me. I hate looking at myself. But as I said, I'm Catherine Scard, financial advisor at Lester Brunt. And who am I and how do I help clients? So I've been in the financial industry for 20 years, started my journey in a bank. So I worked for Santander in Weymouth. And as I mentioned, 5 years ago, I became a self-employed financial advisor working for St James's Place. I'm level 4 diploma qualified and I specialise in pension advice. My route within pensions has now taken me into the elements of divorce, and we'll come on to pensions in divorce later on, but that is the area that I'm now specialising in. As you can see, I've got 2 little people. They're a bit bigger than that now, and I've got Bourbon. I'm a mum to a fur baby. I'm passionate about protection, and that goes hand in hand with your financial planning. And I've recently completed a financial abuse qualification that gives me further insight into the world of financial abuse and how I can aid clients in handling that. So I wanted to share with you some divorce statistics, and I believe it's important to seek advice when you are starting on your divorce journey. I often think people don't know where to start, so they look at a solicitor, but actually there are more people that can be in your corner to aid you. As you can see, 42% of marriages end in divorce in England and Wales, but only 3% of divorcees currently seek financial advice. So actually that's a very small number that we would like to change as advisors, because we really feel if you have the right advice, you can actually flourish through the divorce proceedings, which can be extremely difficult. There's another few statistics on here. 63% of divorcing couples still have financially dependent children at home, and they're aged between the couples between 50 and 64. We know that children are staying at home for longer, and obviously when clients are divorcing, it doesn't matter if your children are underage or overage, it does affect the rest of the family. So again, that's important key points that we discuss as advisors with our clients. And you can see there, it's not just clients under the age of 50. 1 in 4 divorcing couples are aged over 50. So that often means they've built a life together, they've been together for a very long time. And again, that can seem quite daunting as to how assets are going to be split. So again, we're able to help navigate clients through that. So the blame game. The divorce process depends on where you live in the UK. Again, I'm unsure of at the moment where you live, but we've just popped specific points on here to discuss with you. So Divorce Dissolution and Separation Act 2020 was the biggest reform of divorce law in England and Wales in the last 50 years. And no-fault divorce cases came into effect on the 6th of April 2022. They had quite an overhaul from 2020. COVID saw a lot of divorce cases. And then in Scotland, a no-fault divorce is valid after 1 year of separation if both spouses agree. Solicitors can obviously give you advice as to where you are on that divorce journey and how long you have been separated from your ex-spouse, and they can give you the most accurate information on how you could look at divorcing. And we can see in Northern Ireland here, it says couples need to satisfy grounds for divorce. There is something else that's happened recently in the legal world. If your divorce is amicable, you can deal with the same solicitor, and they call it resolution together. I deal with a lot of solicitors, and at the moment it has been quite tricky to get their heads around it, but with their training and guidance that they've had from the specific legal teams, they've actually been able to help clients together, which again sorts of quicker resolution for their clients and allows clients to agree together as to how they want to separate. That's obviously not for everybody, and in most cases you would deal with your own solicitor and your ex-spouse would deal with theirs, but sometimes that is an option depending on your needs and your circumstances. Rules of disengagement. Clients often ask me, what are the rules for splitting assets? There is no set formula. So, as we can see here, courts will always follow a certain position, and what they would like to see is that no party must be left in a financially disadvantaged position to one another. So what do I mean by that? They would like to see that in a case of divorce that the clients are left in an equal standing and that there's no discrimination between the two parties, respective of the roles of, say, a breadwinner or someone who looks after children, whether that be the man or the woman. They try to regard it as equal. Now, I often get from clients, sometimes it seems quite unfair, but your solicitor will always work with you to look at the best possible option for both parties. The courts will look at things like income, earning capacity, property, future financial needs and responsibilities. And as I mentioned in a second, we'll look at different asset types, because a house is often talked about because it's one of your biggest assets you have. But things like pensions sometimes aren't often dealt with through divorce. I have clients that come back to me years later when they've had a divorce to see if they'd be able to have some of their ex-spouse's pensions. That is possible if something called a clean break didn't happen at the divorce process. Again, if someone is in that type of position, we can have that conversation and talk about it. But quite often that would then mean you'd have to go back to a solicitor who would look at a pension sharing, which we'll go on to in a minute. That could mean more expense. My recommendation to clients is quite often, if things can be dealt with at the point, of separation divorce process, and then you can make that break from one another. I feel that is the most cost-effective way for clients to deal with things. Sometimes it can seem like an absolute minefield, and again, I don't know where you are in your journeys, but options for proceeding with divorce. Clients say to me, where do I go? What do I do? Who do I need to talk to? I've just popped a couple of bits of information on this slide regarding mediators and solicitors. Solicitors will always say they're the most expensive option. I talked to one yesterday for one of my clients, and it seemed like my client is going to have quite a dragged out process in divorce. And as the solicitor said, the only people that win are the law firms, because you're paying them an awful lot of money. Most solicitors will quite like you to go through mediation first. This is where guidance is offered to both parties. They remain impartial and they're there to listen to factual information. You do have to pay for mediation. There are ways to get a certain amount of money towards mediation depending on your situation, but they are often payable. They use a more cost-effective option, but like I said, they are not a solicitor to provide advice. They are just there for guidance. And quite often you would have more than one session and you must pay for that session. You can work through dispute through conversation. And again, depending on how amicable your separation is, that might be better for some people than others. There are 3 types. So evaluative, so no nonsense; transformative, where it's a hands-off approach; and facilitative, which is a middle ground approach. Again, it depends what's right for you, but like I'm saying, they will not provide advice. It will just be factual information and guidance. Quite often, most people go through mediation first because it's a first step before solicitors are involved, but you can also have a solicitor already appointed and still go through mediation. So there are those options available. As you can see with the solicitor option, advice is offered to clients. And as we've said, it can be a more expensive option. It's legally binding in law, and obviously solicitors go through many different exams and qualifications as we do as advisors. Represent one client, but as you can see in brackets, I've mentioned the resolution together, and that's obviously what we've just been through and what we've just discussed. Using a solicitor allows you to have a professional in your corner. They understand the legal terms that can quite often be tricky in divorce. We talk in jargon sometimes, and clients often say to us, with the legal system, it can just be so difficult to navigate, and that's why the solicitor would be a benefit to a client in that position. And obviously solicitors will work through correspondence, usually with other parties' solicitors. So the gentleman I saw yesterday, his ex-spouse has got a solicitor in place. He's received information, but nicely he's using his own solicitor that can help him navigate quite a lot of information that's provided in the letter to him. Please, if you've got any questions, like I said, come off mute and ask, or pop them in the chat for Lauren. Divorce can often be quite upsetting. Clients say they often feel alone. It can be emotional. It can be daunting. I obviously speak on a monetary point of view, but it's obviously not often just the money that's involved. It's family, it's children, it's pets, which I know sounds odd talking about that, but we know how part of the family a pet is. But what I truly believe for clients is if you can have the right people in your corner, it can actually be quite liberating. Talking to various people can actually make the problem seem smaller. I know it's still a hill that you've got to climb alone in your mind, but we are there. The client yesterday, he's got so much paperwork from his ex-spouse's solicitor that he just said, I want to shut down. I don't want to look at it. I think having a solicitor and then a financial advisor can also take the emotional state out of it. We can deal with the forms. You've got all the emotion alongside those forms. We can actually aid you and make things easier by filling in those forms for you on your behalf alongside you, that actually then you ticked another box that you felt was an uphill battle to climb. I think the old age saying is knowledge is power. So what I would always say is educate yourself, know your wealth, understand your income, and ensure you have a robust breakdown of your expenditure. This will help you navigate the financial conversations that you're going to need to have with your solicitor. Through my financial abuse qualification, I appreciate that sometimes one client has the power, one client fills out all the forms, one client keeps all the money, one client knows everything about the mortgage, and sometimes the other client doesn't. Again, that's where I feel having those professionals in your corner that can work through paperwork that you have, that can educate you on the type of plans that you own, we can then ensure that you're going to be filling out the right information that the solicitor is going to need. Again, not in every case, it's one versus the other. In my marriage, we're quite open about our finances, so we both know it. So again, you may already have quite a good understanding, and that will actually help you to move into what we call Form E. Again, depending on where you guys are with your financial position at the moment and your divorce proceedings, I don't know whether you'll have come across Form E. I started to aid my client yesterday in filling one out, and unfortunately it is about 45 pages long, which again can feel quite daunting. It takes into account things like your mortgages, your pensions, your business interests, life policies, income, commodities, cash and investments, personal bank accounts and savings, and assets such as cars, collections and furniture. Once we started working through it with my client yesterday, it actually became apparent that the form wasn't as scary as we thought it looked. So again, all I would say is if you can be armed with the information, then you're going to be able to fill the form out in more of a clear and concise format. The reason that solicitors want you to fill this in is, again, if we went back to the earlier slides where it talked about obviously divvying up assets and understanding what one person has over another person, the solicitor can then work with you and understand the plans in place, understand your financial situation, what you want to achieve. You know, have you got children? Who is going to be the sole main responsibility for the children? Is that going to be a shared responsibility between the two of you? Is there maintenance involved? Who needs perhaps more pension or with the house sale? And then they can start to build a robust plan for you. What was interesting on Form E is it's not just, as I would call, the hard facts, so the pension amount, the set cash amount. It also talks about how you've been impacted by the separation. Are you living with someone new? Is your ex-spouse living with someone new? Have you got adult children? Are they still living with you? How has it affected your mental health? How has it affected your physical health? There's quite a lot that I believe needs to go on that Form E, because the more you put on it, the more you will be armed with the information you need. Sometimes clients say to me, I can't fill it out, I don't want to fill it out. But this is the basis of aiding you on your divorce journey. And again, I know it can sound worrying, but if you have that person there to help, then I do believe it will make it easier. So let's recap. Consider what you want from your divorce. Consider the best route and the option for you. Is that a mediator? Is that a solicitor? Is that involving your financial advisor? Is it earlier involvement, later involvement? How would you like us to inject our expertise within your divorce journey? Ensure you've got that right team around you. And that can also be your friends and your family. I think, again, we say it can be quite a lonesome journey. Lean on people, because I'm sure they will be there for you. Make a list of all the assets you have. Be prepared for the process to take time. And again, I believe it takes time because it's such an emotional journey as well as a financial journey. So what I'd like to look at now with you, if that's okay, is various assets that make up our financial life. Again, it might not be privy to everybody. You might not have one or the other, but there are certain things that are important to note and bear in mind when we look at assets. So property. Your home will likely make up a considerable portion of your asset value. Ownership of a property is not reflected in a divorce settlement. It is not unusual for each party to receive an equal share of equity, even if the property was only in the name of one of them. I think that's quite an important thing. People say, oh, it's my house. But depending on how long you've been married and how long people have been living there, are there children? It isn't always reflected in that reasoning and the court process. The court can order a property transfer from one party to another. I've learned along the way, with children, if children are under the age of 18, unfortunately, you cannot force a sale of a house, and that needs to be taken into consideration when assets are being divided. So again, there is lots of things in property. Is there a mortgage? Can one person buy the other person out? Will they need to raise higher lending to be able to do that? That will then need to be changed with the mortgage team. That would then process affordability checks with the mortgage company. And what I mean by affordability checks is they would look at income, expenditure, loans, financial dependence, and then that would be assessed as to whether you could afford it in your own right. Again, that is where a financial advisor can be key to your journey, or a mortgage advisor, depending on if you use financial advisors or mortgage advisors, and they would be able to give you that honest opinion as to how that could help you in the future. Wills and lasting powers of attorney. Unlike a marriage, divorce does not automatically invalidate a will. So if you have one written, quite often, if you're using a solicitor, I would encourage you, whilst you are dealing with your divorce proceedings, to talk to the solicitor about making a new will. Anything left to your ex-spouse in your will be dealt with as if they died on the date your marriage legally ended. And if you've made a lasting power of attorney, the effect of divorce will usually revoke the appointment of your spouse and attorney. My husband's my power of attorney. Obviously, we hope we're not going to need to invoke it for a long time. But if that is the case, then if we got divorced, I would need to search for a new attorney and appoint them. And that's quite important because you want to make sure all your legal affairs are in order. You'll need to review, as we've just said there, your LPA to ensure someone else is on it. And obviously that someone else can make the decision on your behalf should you lose mental capacity. Nancy, I'm just having a look at your question in the chat, so bear with me a second. So, Nancy, again, it would depend on, so Nancy's asked, can you take more money from a property sale if you put more money in at the start? Nancy, I'll obviously pick up with you afterwards, but that is a good point that I've just seen in respect of property and money entering into a property. Me and my husband, when we enter into our property, we have something called a deed of trust. And it is because Matthew brought more into the relationship than I did. So we signed a deed of trust that, heaven forbid, if anything was to happen, then he would get the money back. And what I mean by that is if he's put more money in, if there's a deed of trust signed, then he would receive that back in the event of something happening. Now, if someone brought more money in at the beginning and there was not that deed of trust and you are married, then again, it will be assessed with a court. Okay. Another question is solicitor versus mediator and the costing. Unfortunately, I wouldn't know that in respect of a solicitor. Mediation is normally between £150 and £200 a session. I think some of them can be a little bit cheaper depending on the route that you take, and some can be slightly more expensive. Solicitors, again, will also vary in price quite significantly. I use a particular firm of solicitors locally to me for my clients because I truly believe that they give the service that I would want to receive if I was in the position of going through a divorce. So yeah, it just depends on the solicitor, your location as well. Southern solicitors are often more expensive than northern solicitors. So what I would probably be inclined to say, it would be like we were selling our house, maybe you're getting 3 separate valuations. I would perhaps go to solicitors and ask about separate fees. Some solicitors charge to write a letter, some don't. Some charge an hourly fee, some charge depending on what they're doing for you. So I do think it's important just to understand that, okay? When should you perhaps involve a financial advisor? Again, I have clients who already have me as a financial advisor, and they obviously would then use my services. Some clients come to me once they've got what we call the pension sharing order, which I'll talk about in a moment. So that is nearer the end of the divorce process. What I'd probably encourage clients to consider is having us at the start of the divorce process. You quite often are bombarded with information. do I get half the house? Do I get half the pension? Should we split the assets half and half? Should I be entitled to more? Working with a financial advisor that would look at your income and expenditure and then be able to project that for the future, quite often that would then indicate to you that you might need more than what you thought you did. Doesn't often compare with the less, because you'd always want half of at least everything on general consensus for clients when we talk. But if you have children and you are the main earner, or you're going to be the sole carer for those children, you may need more than the ex-spouse. So I think injecting a financial advisor at the start of the conversation could actually be more beneficial for clients. We'll pop a little bit of information up regarding financial advisors. Obviously, we're running this webinar today, but you might have a financial advisor. You may use the services of someone else. You can obviously go online and search advisors. So it is up to you how you find that advisor and how they can obviously help you. So let's go back to the slides if I can get it to work. So I've been flicking through the chat. So life insurance, as I said earlier, I'm quite passionate about life insurance, and I'm able to aid clients with pensions, insurance, investments, mortgage advice and inheritance tax advice. So quite often we speak to a lot of people about life insurances. Many couples can actually have joint life insurance policies with a premium paid to just one. Joint policies, there's normally a clause within policies that can ensure they're split after a divorce. We often have to send proof to the insurance company, but that absolutely can be done. So there is the option to do that. Nowadays, we do a lot more single policies because the difference between a joint premium and a single premium has come down. So it means that you're not paying too much more for single premiums than joint premiums. And that would mean that in the event of a split, you'd have your own policy that you can take with you. There is also times when policies are put into trust. We always recommend that clients' life insurance policies are put into trust. Invariably, they're to cover mortgage debt. And we say that if insurance policies are put into trust, then they get paid out quickly to the people that need them. Again, in a divorce process, if they are in trust, we're going to just need to unpick that trust. I've done that recently with another client, and it just basically means us filling out new forms to supersede the ones that we've already got. Another thing that we've obviously put as a big bullet point, if you have a joint bank account and the joint bank account's closed, the premium might not be paid. If it's being paid from one person's account rather than the other, they could stop paying it, and that means you have no cover. So again, through that proceeding, through the solicitor or through a financial advisor, it's really important for us to understand if you have those types of policies in place, because as it shows on there, you could be left with no cover, which again could be hugely detrimental to your financial future. And again, it says it can be prudent to arrange your own life cover. I've recently done a new policy for a client because they weren't able to separate the benefit. So the policy had to be cancelled and a new policy taken out. So again, that's an important conversation to be having with a financial advisor. Trusts. I've just touched on trusts because you can have life insurance policies in trusts. And it says here the court has wide-ranging powers depending on how the trust was administered and who was to benefit. So assets are going to be put in trusts. Like we said, life policies, investments, houses at times. So if assets were transferred to a trust during the course of your marriage, it is likely to be classed as a nuptial settlement. If the trust was created before your marriage or civil partnership, the court's approach will depend on the history of the trust, and you will need to provide details of that trust on the Form E. As I said, helping my client fill one out yesterday, I could see that Form E, and it was on there and asked for details of it. Again, if you've had financial advisors that have set up your trust, please go back to them. They'll be able to help you. Alternatively, if you're using a new financial advisor, just aim to produce all the information to them, because then they will be able to advise you and pop it on the Form E with you and help you out in that respect. Spousal maintenance, a regular payment made by a former husband, wife or civil partner to their ex-partner. You may actually be able to claim tax relief if you're paying maintenance to your former spouse. So again, that would cross over with our job and accountant. So you might have an accountant that can aid you and help you with your tax return. If you have a high income child benefit tax charge with your spouse, when you split, you may be able to claim child benefit in full from the point that your ex-spouse moves out, even before the divorce, and this can be backdated. So again, I don't know your position on child maintenance or if there are children involved, but what we mean by high income child benefit is over £50,000 of earning. Child benefit is what we call means tested, and then over £60,000 it is completely eradicated, so you don't get any child benefit. So again, that in a split, you may earn less, so then you may be entitled to the child benefit. So it's definitely worth checking. Tax. As we said, divorce is one of the most emotional events that you can face. You're probably not thinking about your tax bill, but you need to think about various elements. So the government has extended the no gain, no loss treatment, whereas there is a transfer of assets. And we've just touched on spousal maintenance, capital gains tax, and pensions. There's lots that we can go into for that. So if you have questions, then please pop them in the chat, and perhaps we can obviously come back to them offline, because tax is obviously such an emotional subject along with divorce that obviously it takes a lot of time to understand your personal circumstances and then the benefits of potentially saving some tax through the divorce process. So let's recap. Ensure you understand your ownership structure prior to entering your divorce. As we've just said in that chat box, if there was money brought in before, is there legal constraints to talk about that being brought in before? There certainly is in my relationship. If not, then that would be viewed slightly differently with a court. Consider the options with your will after divorce, and ensure you decide on beneficiaries so it can be changed quickly. Consider changing your power of attorney documents if your spouse is named as an attorney. That is extremely, extremely important because you don't want them to have any power, because it is a legally binding document. Consider your protection options. Can the policies be split, or will you need to take out new plans? Do you need to change the plan? Do you need to change the beneficiary? Is the policy in trust? Do we need to amend that? Consider your tax benefits on divorce and your state benefit payments. Can you receive more through your divorce? Just going to pause a moment just to see if there's any questions in the chat box, but I don't think there is at the moment.
Yeah, it's all clear here as well, Kat.
Lovely, thanks, Lauren. So one more thing before I go. It's not one more thing, it's quite a big thing. As I said to you earlier, I'm a pension specialist. So pensions are my passion. I know that sounds perhaps a little bit corny and people think, oh my goodness, Catherine, you need to get out more. But pensions are so flexible and can really benefit people in the future. I'm only, 38 in a month's time. So quite often I'm not thinking about my pension or my retirement, but it's something that should be really thought about through the divorce process, because it can be so beneficial for your future. So pensions are assets that are often forgotten, as I've just said, but they can be hugely valuable and must be addressed. And in most cases, a potentially huge asset that can be completely ignored. We talked about your house being one of the biggest assets. Depending on your position in the marriage, depending on you were the breadwinner, you were the stay-at-home person, depending on have you worked for various companies, what's your income, they are often big assets that can be next to your house or even exceed your house in value. In the majority of couples, one person has 80% of the pension wealth. Now, I'm not picking on the guys, but for example, I obviously took time off to have my children. So my wealth within my pension, in essence, is less than my husband's, because I didn't have the earning power while I just took the time off. And the pension is worth more than the house in 40% of divorces. I keep jumping ahead of myself because I keep getting a bit excited because we're talking about pensions. But you can see it is an asset that really should be considered. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of clients come to me when they have actually divorced their ex-spouse and say, can I now claim part of his pension? There is an option for that, but again, there will be more expense to go back through the solicitors to look at those pensions. So what I would encourage is, and the reason why people involve financial advisors, is we can aid with looking at those pensions at the beginning. So splitting the asset. Pensions can be used flexibly in divorce proceedings. It's integral if you've taken time off work or have earned less than your ex-spouse, as I mentioned a moment ago, and taking into account life expectancy. A 50-50 split might not often give a fair outcome. Women tend to live a bit longer than men, so again, that would be considered within the divorce settlement. And on average, women hold 85.5% less than men in workplace-based or privately organised pensions. So sorry, again, picking on the guys, but we are the ones that have the children. So generally we take time off work, we go part-time. But this is where in divorce proceedings, pensions can come into their own, because it can bridge that gap between one person not having as much as the other person in essence, and that will be taken into consideration in those court proceedings with the judge. So overall, of divorces that included a financial remedy, less than 40% factored in those pensions. And that's why I get lots of questions asked about, can I have some of my husband's pension? Can I have some of my wife's pension now? You know, we've been divorced 3 years. Pensions are shared in less than 13% of divorces, and less than 14% of divorces including a pension disposal. So it is really, really important that perhaps pensions are built into that divorce process. And there is a section, as I've said, on that for me, so you will understand your ex-spouse's pension position. They will obviously understand yours. And again, it just needs to be highlighted that that perhaps is a conversation that you want to go through. This section just talks about options for pensions. So earmarking, so it's a pension attachment order, redirects part or all of the member's pension to the ex-partner when it comes to be paid. So the pension benefits are said to be earmarked for the other person. So I know that's a lot of information. So what does that mean? Effectively, let's take the NHS as an option. If you had a financial settlement, you and the pension was involved, and let's say you were getting half each, one of you worked for the NHS, they would then set up an NHS pension your own right, and effectively the money is earmarked for you. So that would mean that you would have that pension your own right when you got to your retirement. All right. And as it shows there, an order is placed against the relevant amount of pension for it to be allocated at the retirement age. So it just depends how you want to do it. Most clients will want a fair split. So the earmarking, as we've said there, it's almost you become a member in your own right, but still under the steam of your ex-spouse. So it's quite important to understand that if you are having an earmarking, you're in essence still tied in that way. Agreeing on splits of pensions, generally it would be a conversation that perhaps you would have with your ex-spouse if you are on amenable position to have that conversation. Generally, you would talk to the mediator and you'd look at pensions. And quite often some clients go, well, I don't want to touch your pension if you don't touch my pension, and we'll split everything else. But again, that can be an unfair split because you might not know what they've got in their pension and vice versa. So again, it's quite important that that Form E is filled out so you can understand what they have to what you have. Then a solicitor would be involved and would be looking at those pension splits. This isn't something that we do with our clients. It is done through a solicitor and what we call an actuary. Quite often, if you have a final salary pension, and sorry, I'm going into a little bit more detail now, but what a final salary does is it gives the member of the scheme an income for life. And what we would need to do as advisors and actuaries is we'd need to assess that pension to see how much you would potentially need from your ex-spouse's pension in the future. Now, like I said, it sounds quite intricate, but what the solicitor would do is discuss with you what you feel you would want. They would look at your income, they'd look at the differences in income between you and your ex-spouse, and then they might get an actuarial report, which would give you an idea of the percentage split that you would have versus your ex-spouse. Now, that might be a 50-50 split, but an actuarial report would look at life expectancy, would look at income, would look at expenditure, would look at children, and they would then produce a report that would aid you in understanding, should I be having more of this pension? They are not free though. So some of my clients have often gone to me, I don't want an actuarial report. I just want it over and done with because it's been dragging on a long time. Or I don't want access to his pension, her pension, so I just want it split. But if you do feel that there is some unfairness, then an actuarial report will be able to give you more of an accurate description as to what they believe would be a fairer split. Generally, those actuarial reports are anything between £2,000 and £2,500. So they can add the cost to your divorce settlement. Quite often that settlement is split. But again, there is no fair way to, there's no model that you can use. But what I would say is the starting point is us as financial advisors to give you an idea of what the pensions do, what the pensions are, because there's various different types of pensions. So we've obviously talked about final salary. There is also money purchase pensions. They work in different ways, which is why it's important to have a financial advisor to help you understand the models of those pensions, to then start to consider those reflective splits that perhaps you should be entitled to. All right. So offsetting. So this is another thing someone's just popped in the chat about, is there that model or calculator? There's no set model really, but offsetting is a way of offsetting assets against other assets. So you get to keep your pension. So some clients often say, I want my pensions, you get more of a share of the house. And again, that can be done through a solicitor and that conversation can be had. But again, it's just important to understand what that pension looks like now, what that pension could look like in the future. And also, if you're offsetting a pension against a house, pensions will go up in value, but so will homes. So that again is a consideration that you need to take into account when thinking about any splits that you have and that you do. And pension sharing, this is the most popular, and this is where I get involved mainly with my clients. Pension sharing provides a clean break between parties by immediately splitting their pension asset. So for example, I helped a lady recently, her ex-spouse worked for an engineering firm. He had a final salary pension. She was she'd already done the calculations and was entitled to a portion of that pension. The pension provider that he was with would not allow my client to stay with them and be a member in their own right. So what that means is my client has to pick up that pot of pension that she was awarded and move it somewhere. So I was then able to help her move that to St. James's Place. So I now offer her ongoing advice on that pension. And that then means there has been a clean break between those pensions. He has no say on hers, she has no say on his, and they have a split. Okay, and they obviously, she then has the power over her own pension, or if that was a gentleman that I'd been helping, he has power over his pension as to how he wants it invested, where he wants the funds, and what he wants to do with it in the future. So the importance of advice. We've gone through this and touched on these points throughout, and obviously someone mentioned in the chat, when should you get them involved? I don't think it matters. Well, it does matter. I think you should get them involved at the very beginning. Have those people in your corner at the start. But obviously, if you haven't done that, just perhaps make sure you talk to an advisor before the divorce is finalised, just to make sure that any questions that you might have can be answered. Solicitors are fantastic, but they're not financial advisors. Alternatively, financial advisors are fantastic, but we're not solicitors. So we almost need that team to be working together. It talks here about advisors reducing your administration. We have lots of paperwork, but hopefully we can take that worry away from you when dealing with things. Generally, clients are living longer. So again, that's why it's important to have that financial advisor injected into the conversation earlier to understand the longevity of the savings, the pension, the investments. Are they going to last? Financial planning needs become more complex through our lifetime. And again, financial advice changes, legislation changes. So again, that's why it's important to perhaps have someone in your corner. The non-financial benefits advice could be more important for well-being and mental health than any other financial benefit. I often say to clients, I'm more than just a financial advisor. I can help plan your lifestyle, and perhaps I can help take the worry away. And if I've taken the worry away, then I've done my job properly. And we all know that divorce can be that emotional subject. People often say to me, I just want to bury my head in the sand, but unfortunately it's not going away. So if we can inject some of support that we can provide our clients within that conversation, then I truly feel it could be more of a seamless process for our clients. Someone's just mentioned they can't hear me. Can everyone else hear me? Lauren, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear everything all right.
Okay. Well, we're nearly at the end anyway. The The webinar, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention at the beginning, but I'm sure you can see the little red dot. Apologies. We are recording the session because a few people weren't able to attend due to work commitments. So for the person that can't perhaps hear, we can always obviously send you the recording and you can obviously watch the last few minutes, all right? And just finally, it says what matters to you. Remember, a problem shared, I believe, is a problem halved. Don't go through it alone. Have the people in your corner and you'll flourish. So that brings me to the end of it. As you can see, my contact details are on the screen. Lauren kindly popped them in the chat box. I think we've answered quite a lot of the questions from the chat today, but anything else that I haven't answered, we can pick up offline. Please, 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 if you need to talk to me, just reach out and I'm more than happy to answer any questions or queries. We'd love to get a bit of feedback. Oh, makes me nervous when I say that. But if you could, and you're willing to, please scan the QR code to give us your feedback. You can then register your interest in any future events. We've had quite a lot through the year and we're hoping to plan more because they've been very successful for our clients and prospective clients. So as you can see, it just gives you the steps there. So we'll keep that on screen for a couple of minutes for you. But please, if you've got any other questions that are generic, please pop them in the chat box now and I'm more than happy to answer them. If not, we'll let you all go.